Hey, we're going to talk about Lyme disease. We're just going to go right into this. Now, rather than go through what Lyme disease is, Alan, and how you contracted Lyme disease, let's start with what did you do to fix this problem? How did you get over Lyme disease?
Great question. Yeah, from the start, it was a gradual approach of just researching things and adding more and more protocols. And I was very, very fortunate and blessed to have done courses with yourself or Charles Poliquin, which started to give me structure and ideas. So initially, the way it was presenting itself for me was absolute chronic fatigue. Well, what I thought was adrenal fatigue. So I was reading things like James Wilson's book on adrenal fatigue. The problem was I was thinking all the time, this has not just come up out of nowhere. I was under a lot of stress at that time in my life, but none of the issues seemed to be, it just seemed completely out of context. You know, my body was just shutting down. I was getting extreme pain, and we can go through all of the symptomology a bit later. But in a nutshell, I initially started by treating it very much as if it were an adrenal issue. So I was taking things like cordyceps, rhodiola rosea, ginseng, and I was getting very little, if any, benefits from that at all. And then it was when I finally really clued into the fact that it was Lyme's disease, because up till then I was, is it chronic fatigue? Is it ME? And if it is, what are those things? How can you even approach them? So the first port of call would have been a podcast I listened to, and I still remember to this day because I've got a lot of gratitude for the man, was Dr. Peter Josling, who was the inventor and developer of Allicin Max garlic. And he was on a podcast and he was discussing how effective it was being used for treatment of Lyme's. And by then I was probably about 75% convinced that I had Lyme's disease. I'd had a clinical diagnosis, but formal bloods. Sorry, say again?
No, I'm just saying, just as you're talking about this, because I just read this book on garlic and all the benefits of it recently. So I just brought that
There you go.
Yeah.
It is phenomenal. And I'll send you, actually, he's very generous. He's shared a PDF with all the studies that he conducted, and he said he's good for me to share it. So I'll ping that over to you as soon as we're finished. It's a phenomenal book. And I think I shared it on my website as well. But I was still, I was still in a real muddle about what this was. I was kind of winging it a little bit. But I thought, well, I'll start to take this. And I ordered it in, and I started to notice an improvement. And one of the things that I would say, I'm hoping, this has always been something that I've been very, very committed to. I did make a personal vow that if I could get through it, and if I made it out of having Lyme's disease without being over dramatic alive, because it does claim people's lives quite readily. And as you'll see when we talk about some of the symptoms I had, which included a heart attack,
wow,
you can see how very quickly it can end you. And I thought to myself, whether you want to believe in God, creator, universe, I just said, if I can make it through this, then I commit to just getting as much information out there. So when you contacted me, it was a no-brainer. This will reach more people than potentially a book that I'd write or anything like that. And hopefully it will be, because I haven't got an axe to grind. I haven't got companies that I sponsor me. I haven't got a fixed view. I treat Lyme's disease very much like personal training, in the sense that you've got to look at what it is that people are presenting with and adjust accordingly. So there is no one size fits all. I wanted to make that clear from the get-go. But there are some really good, sound lines of inquiry and approaches you can take that will yield good results. And hopefully people will be able to pick those up quickly. So moving on. So I got the garlic. I definitely noticed some strong improvements, but still very, very ill, still absolutely exhausted, still getting migrating joint pain. And basically it was, once again, a big debt to Charles Poliquin, that I was listening to a lot of podcasts through various companies and formats that I'd managed to get access to, that I heard about the Cowden protocol. And that was really, really a very, very comprehensive protocol, which is available, I believe. You'll definitely be able to get it in the US. It's predominantly South American herbs in tinctures, which you add to water. And the way it is approached is very much like almost like antibiotics, that you have a cycle where you take it, then you move to another one. Then you have like almost a deload week. So for strength coaches, you'll get it. You take all these supplements, then you drop, and you actually almost encourage the limes to then manifest itself again. So it feels like the coast is clear, bang, you whack it with another antimicrobial, another antibacterial, another antiviral. And it's a process of titrating up those dosages. So one of the biggest problems that I came across were people who'd say, oh, I did that and I just could never do it again. And you say, well, why? What happened? And they say, well, I took Cemento, for example, which is one of the key ones. So if you're looking to getting a start, look at Cemento, which is also cat's claw, or Uncardia tomatosa. And that was very, very, that was very strong. But the problem is that, and we were discussing this just before we started, is things that where people go in gung-ho on stuff. So the drops, the maximum drops that you're supposed to take, and it's often based on weight as well, would be, say, 30 drops in say, a whiskey tumbler of water, about half full. And people go 30, and they get absolutely wiped out. So they are in bed for a week. They've never felt worse. They felt like they were dying. And the problem is, just to explain to people who are listening to this, it's called Herxheimer response, a Herxheimer reaction. It's a die-off of the bacteria. So what happens when the bacteria dies off is it basically is like car fumes that just permeate the body. So you'll get aches, you'll get chills, you'll get fevers, you'll get brain fog. You know, you will not be able to structure one thought in front of another. And the problem is it can be very off-putting. Of course it would. You know, if I said to you, right, okay, Mike, you're going to take this testosterone booster, but it'll probably put you in bed for a week. You might be vomiting. You'll probably get diarrhea. But after that, you're going to get a PB on your deadlift, and you know, you're getting 6 pounds of muscle mass. You go, you know what? Maybe I'll just continue with the training and sack that off. So the problem was,
like me, I would be like, okay, cool, I can deal with that.
Well, exactly, yeah, but that's very much more an alpha approach.
The average person would be like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm like, okay, you're telling me after 1 week of that, though, I'm going to have this and that and so forth. I'll be like, okay, I can handle 1 week of that. The average person, you're right, though. They wouldn't be able to handle 24 hours of that.
But this is why, with all due respect, I had to come off a lot of the Limes forums, because I was reading them for advice. And one thing, and I don't want to be judgmental because every man's burden is his heaviest. But one of the things I saw was the sort of kind of weak-minded, I'm thinking, you know, people posting stuff and you're like, why are you fucking posting this stuff? Do or don't do. But
right.
What you're doing is you're marinating in your own, you know, your inability to move forward, and you want to share that. And like we said last time about crabs in a bucket, you know, you put they just pull each other in. Oh no, you know, maybe wait a while. And so I started seeing people saying,
it's like when people say there's power in acceptance. And I hate that saying. If there's things you don't like about yourself, if there's things you don't like about yourself that you can actually change. Now, I'm not talking about your skin tone or your height. Okay, there's certain things that are immutable. They're not subject to change. But if I don't like the way I look, I can change that. If I don't like how much money I'm making, I can change that. If I don't like having these self-defeating thoughts, I can change those things. And why not try to change those things? Even if you don't succeed, why not put effort into actually trying to change rather than acceptance? I think acceptance is one of the most unhealthy things. Like with all this body shaming stuff now, just love your body the way it is. No, if you're 100 pounds overweight, you should not love yourself the way it is. You should be disgusted with yourself. Every time you look in the mirror, you should be disgusted with yourself, because that disgust is what's going to fuel the energy you need to make change. You know, if you just love yourself or whatever, look, if I live in a cardboard box and I'm eating once a week,
I love myself.
This situation sucks. I want to get out of this situation.
Well, let me ask you, Mike, what is the forward drive of change? It's dissatisfaction with your current situation.
Yes.
All change is driven from dissatisfaction with your situation. If you're satisfied with your situation, you're looking at life and going, yeah, but this is what I'm happy with. This is where I am, this kind of current position. I'm healthy, I'm strong, I'm lean, I'm surrounded by people who love, then that's different. But if you are, that to me is conning yourself also. It's like when we see, I'm sorry, but when we see posters of people on the front of Vogue or whatever and saying, this is the new fit. And it's somebody who's morbidly obese. No, what we're seeing is somebody who may be flexible or they've got good balance. That is not the same thing as health, okay? You know, just because you're, and the fact of the matter is that anybody who speaks out now about that, it's an easy and lazy opportunity. Shut down the argument by just saying, oh, you're shaming. And the fact of the matter is that, I'm sorry, but data doesn't have feelings. You know, we know that these things aren't good for you. Okay, so you just can't pretend it anymore. It's like the whole situation over the pandemic or whatever, and you just think to yourself, people were shaming each other. You're not having a vaccine, you're not having this, you're not doing that. And the fact of the matter is that that sort of kind of mindset is not productive, and it's divisory, and it's not pushing you forward. All change is driven from dissatisfaction with your current situation, because otherwise we're just in stasis. But anyway, so I saw these sites, and can you hear me still? Sorry, because the screen just froze. Yeah, okay, no, we're good. And I just thought, well, you're just going to have to take, you know, you're going to have to take responsibility for yourself. You can't be reliant on anybody else. Quite frankly, the medical world over here, as regards Lyme's disease, is absolutely disgusting and shocking. And we can get into that later. But so I got onto the Cowden protocol, and I would say once again, it's not one size fits all. I can't say for everybody listening it will have the same impact that it had on me, but I credit it with saving my life. It had all the compounds for detoxification. So one of the weird things with Lyme's is that it's got an affinity for heavy metals, particularly mercury. So you don't need that in your body. And then you think, well, if I'm going to have a mercury detox, do I want that going to my brain? Obviously, you know better than anybody that there has to be a very structured and very careful approach around removing amalgams and mercury from the body. So it had heavy metal detox in it. It had also protocols so that if you did get a Herxheimer reaction, you could take things like Pinella and Berber. And apologies, I don't have the Latin name off the top of my head, but if you go online, you know, all of these things are readily available. You'll be able to find out what they what
Prunella? Did you say Prunella?
No, Berber and Pinella. It's Pinella, and it's it'll come back to me. But yeah, it's I think it's a member of the aniseed family. But anyway, the whole Cowden protocol came as one structured box of tinctures, and it had instructions. And once again, I just followed it. I thought, don't, like you were saying, just take the bloody lot. And I thought, right, that's my gut instinct, right? Just pour them all into a jug and just drink it. But I migrated it up, I titrated it up and up and up, and I started to find that I was getting more energy, that the aches and pains I was getting were reducing, that the light sensitivity, the tinnitus, the palpitations, all of that were reducing. And then what I would do is that, like I said, you go into a deload week. So then you're just going on to a very maintenance phase. And there were quite a few of the supplements in there that you'll be interested in, because they go right back to, I was taking, for example, your Restorezyme. Why? Because serrapeptase is a really potent, really, it's in all, I would say whatever protocol you're doing, you want to take serrapeptase, because Lyme's, when it finds itself embattled, is a devious little fucker. What it does is it shields itself in a biofilm, like a lipid like a lipid shell, and a fatty shell, and it just retreats. And that's why Lyme's is really difficult to diagnose through blood tests, because what will happen is it's not in the bloodstream, it's maybe in collagen structures, etc. So that's why antibiotic failure is such a prevalent thing, because when you're taking antibiotics, it will wipe out the spirochete family, but then I believe it's called the cyst form. It retreats into cyst form. So it's like, right, okay, we're under battle. We're not gone, but we're just going to hunker down for winter. As soon as you stop taking the antibiotics, we're going to come back and fuck you up. And that's why if you watch some of the documentaries, there's one called Under the Skin. It was, for me at the time, I was still in recovery. I really found it difficult to watch because it was just so horrendous. What was, you know, seeing people, I think sometimes when you're very, very empathetic to people's plight, it's almost sometimes a bit too much to watch. And there was a lot of issues around antibiotic resistance, antibiotic failure. And so this process, and you just rinse and repeat, and you just continue taking it, and you keep using the different protocols that Dr. Cowden came up with. And like I said, and one thing that, if he's watching this, I just wanted to say a huge thank you, because I do credit you with, you know, my life back. And if he's not, then I do intend to find out, you know, how I can contact him at some juncture and let him know, because people need to know how beneficial they've been to other people's lives. Going back to other people that helped, when I was taking the garlic, I I'd listened to this podcast with Dr. Peter Josseling, and this just goes to show where fate steps in, whatever you want to call it, the universe. And I just rang to see whether I could place an order and maybe start up a trade account. And I got this very well-spoken English gentleman. He said, "Oh, hello." I said, "Oh, hello. Yeah, I just want to," and they, "Oh, okay. Yes, that's no problem. We can set you up with an account." I said, "Is that Peter Josseling? Is that Dr. Josseling?" And he said, "Yes, it is." I said, "I've just listened to a podcast with you." Oh, that's very old. Yes. Well, it's good to hear from you. And we got talking, and he gave me more sensible advice in the first 10 minutes of the conversation than I'd had from a year and a half from the medical fraternity. He said, "Well, I can't believe you haven't been diagnosed. It seems to me that it's evident that it's either Bartonella or Babesia. And, these are studies. I'll send you the clinical study." And they basically run a study. So for people who are looking to take the garlic, and I've got no dog in the fight. The one I took, you would get from Designs for Health. And I am trying to remember, it's Alamed or something along those lines. It goes by different names in different countries. So for those people listening to America, it's very easy to get because you just get it from Designs for Health, and they're an absolutely exceptional company. So long story short, they did a study in Texas of people who were antibiotic failure. They'd taken antibiotics, they still had Lyme's. One woman had to literally crawl up the stairs at night. She couldn't get to bed. And they did this study, and they studied it under mass spectroscopy. They did there were PCR and a number of other study analysis to see what the prevalence before and after, and they showed the titers, and it was absolutely astronomical. It decimated the Lymes. It absolutely decimated it. And going back to ancient Egyptians, the reason that they think that there was a great anecdote he told me, which was that in the plague, they had 2 convicted felons who were to be scheduled for execution, and they said, no, what we will do to these felons is we will make them go out and collect all the plague, carriers, all the dead corpses. So these 2 French guys are out, and they've got a diet of wine, a little flask of wine, bread and garlic, and they outlived everybody around them because it was that effective. So garlic was really the first one. Then it was the Cowden Protocol. Some of the other ones that people may want to look at, and it is, I can't emphasize this enough, it has to be bespoke. So the first thing, without going into the whole situation with what is Lyme's and how do we get it, Lyme's is nature's dirty needle. So it is not just Lyme's disease. That's not the problem. It's all the co-infections. It's Babesia, Bartonella, Ehrlichia. So that I think Rickettsia, which I think is cat scratch fever, Mycoplasma. So you get a nice little injection of all that shit in the bloodstream. So there are questionnaires which I'm going to reference the viewers to, which will help them determine what co-infections they have, and that's really important because do you have joint pain? Do you have nerve pain? Are you having cognitive issues? Are you having issues around heart issues? And so what you can do is make it much more bespoke. So obviously, I would say, and I think you'll be completely on board with this, because at the end of the day, we know that 90% of illness, probably arguably all illness, is driven by inflammation, isn't it? Right. If you think about whether it's heart disease or cancer or diabetes or whatever you're looking at, it's always driven by inflammation. So,
well, that's why let me jump on point, because you brought up something last time that I'm really glad you did, because a lot of people, when they look at blood work, they fixate on the wrong things when they're trying to figure out if their heart is healthy. And I think the 2 most important blood markers that I look at are, 1, highly sensitive C-reactive protein. You want that very low. And then the other one is homocysteine levels. Now, if you're B vitamin deficient, you're going to have very high homocysteine levels, and that makes you more prone for not just heart issues, but other organ issues and all that. Now, if you have on my last test, you want to be below 1 on highly sensitive C-reactive protein, cardiac reactive.
Yeah.
Now, they say anything below 2 is good. I think 2 is still too high. I think you want to be below 1, as low as possible below 1. So I think I was at 0.3 on my last test. I usually fluctuate between 0.2. I don't think it's ever been higher than 0.5. It's usually between 0.2 and 0.4. Now, I credit that to really healthy eating, making sure I get enough sleep every night, and taking Restorzym, because Restorzym is the most powerful supplement you can take to mitigate excess inflammation. Everybody's focused on
100%.
fish. Fish oil suppresses the immune system and drives down inflammation. That's not something you want to do unless you have an overactive immune system. So I think fish oil is used for very precise means. I know fish oil is all the rage right now, but I think a lot of people are making the mistake of overdosing that without understanding why they're even taking it. And there's really only precise
100%.
situations.
100% right.
Well, someone like Restorazyme is just enzymes. You can't overdose on Restorazyme. You could take the whole bottle and you're not going to be going to the ER. You might be going to the toilet a little bit more often, but you're not going to be going to the ER. All right, if you left a bottle out and your dog got to it by accident and he ate the whole thing, your dog's not going to die. He might have a little bit of nausea for a while and all that, but he's not going to die. So enzymes are the most important thing for the way enzymes work is it's not so much that they lower inflammation, they lower the need for an inflammatory response. So they induce healing. What is inflammation? Inflammation is the induction of healing. You work out really hard, you have inflammation. That's a good thing. Inflammation is the beginning of the recovery process. But the key is, what can I do to heal so that I don't need an inflammatory response? And that's what Restorazyme. Enzymes start the healing process so that you don't have to have an aggressive inflammatory response. That's why I love taking 5 caps on an empty stomach right after I work out. Just begin that. It's not going to shut down inflammation, but it's going to reduce the need for an aggressive inflammatory response.
Exactly. And I mean, for me, obviously, I did the biosignature, and Charles Poliquin was a huge advocate of fish oil. And for myself, I would say that the inflammatory response is not the primary reason why I would take an omega-3. It would be for things like brain health, etc., joint health. But you're absolutely right. You know, what we don't want to do is we want to reduce inflammation. We don't want to suppress inflammation. Right. And I think that actually, you know, that was one of the things, and it came to me when I was better from Lyme's, was that I was like, what is this mess, this bomb site of issues that seemed completely disparate? And then I thought to myself, it really came to me quite clearly one day, they all had one thing in common. They were all symptomatic of inflammation. So you have, for those listening, and obviously my heart goes out to any people who are currently suffering with Lyme's, and I do sincerely hope, and it is my wish, that this talk really gives some structure and help and assistance to them. But you will have tinnitus, like a kettle whistling in your ear. As soon as there's any silence, it will drive you mental. Light sensitivity. So I'd go out on a sunny day and I'd be squinting because I'd be like, Jesus, it's jangling. It's so bright. You're getting joint pain. You're getting migrating pain. You're getting pins and needles. So all of these things, afterwards I looked at them and I thought, why is Lyme such a kind of car crash of symptoms? And then I thought, because it's systemic inflammation across the whole body. It is attacking your thyroid. It's attacking your adrenals. It's you name it. Your skeletal system. The little bastard spirochetes are like little drill bits, and they are busily burrowing into joint structures and creating arthritic changes. And it's you know, I would not wish it on my worst enemy. I would not wish it on my worst enemy. And I think my biggest frustration over the whole COVID period was that something with the infection fatality rate of flu was given so much airtime, and we've got the biggest vector-borne illness in the world currently running at pandemic levels, but it's called the Great Pretender. So you just don't know. So somebody might be sitting here right now and they go, I wonder whether I've got Lyme's. Well, do you have migrating pain? If you're a woman, do you get cystitis? Okay, you know, quite regularly. Do you get a pain in your elbow one day and the neck the next? Is your neck cracking all the time? Do you get headaches? Are you getting muscle spasms? Is your sleep disrupted? Well, you could say to me, hold on a second, Alan, Jesus Christ, that's a lot of different stuff. And these could have, in and of themselves, completely different issues driving them. And I accept that. You go into the doc and go, oh, Jesus, my hip hurts. He goes, you got arthritis. Okay. You go in and go, doc, I can't even think straight nowadays. I think, you know, I don't know what is wrong with my brain. Right, we'll do a brain scan. Yeah, we found one in there. You're good. There are no lesions. You know, bye-bye. You're getting palpitations. You're getting. So the problem is, do I sympathize with a medical world that is misdiagnosing it? Yes, to an extent, because I think that actually it's a really difficult thing to pin down. However, in Lyme's endemic areas, in which I live in one, I'm in the New Forest, that is a Lyme endemic area. There are deer everywhere. When I moved up from London, I'm running through the New Forest like Rocky with a backpack. I got, I'm running through long grass. Listen, I was from London. I would not have known a tick if he was 6'2", dressed in a blue suit with a placard saying, "I am a fucking tick." I'm just running along, happy. Look, there's a deer. Boy, oh, this is just why I moved down here. Would not check myself over. Had no idea what I was even looking for. And the problem is, you might say, well, hold on a second, but how do you know you? The problem is that most people's pushback there is, yeah, but you get a rash. You get a rash in less than 50% of cases. So people watching this right now who are thinking to themselves, oh, I didn't get a rash. I got bitten by a tick. I didn't get a rash. That is not a clinical diagnosis. Okay, that is not a diagnosis at all. Rid yourself of that, and don't let anybody from the medical fraternity tell you otherwise. It's bullshit. I'm telling you that not because I'm that smart, but because I've listened to Dr. Fred Kuipers. I've listened to Dietrich Klinger. I've listened to Richard Horowitz. These are people who are way above my pay grade, and they will tell you the same thing as I'm telling you now, which is that a bullseye rash is not a clinical marker of Lyme's disease. If you get one, get straight to the doctor, immediately get on antibiotics, you'll be good. 5 weeks of doxycycline, it should clear it up. Yeah. However, if you are like me and you got bitten by a tick, you had no idea about it, and you just went on through your day, it will wait, it will wait, it will wait till you hit stress, work stress, life stress, bang, and then it's out and it's attacking everything that you have. I diverged there, but I thought it was important to kind of give some context. Some of the other things, when I came off so we'd say garlic, Cowden protocol. I wasn't happy with my energy levels. I still was quite dissatisfied. So I went through a whole raft of different approaches, just to try out what worked for me. Things like carnitine, tyrosine. I made a little list here of some of the things that I NADH, CoQ10, tyrosine. One of the things I would say is that I read a really good book by Dr. Sarah Myhill on chronic fatigue, and it was a great little catchphrase. You'll love it. It says it's mitochondria, not hypochondria. So the idea is that one of the first things I'd always recommend to clients when they're suffering from things like chronic fatigue, or things like that maybe they've got over Guillain-Barré or now long COVID, is that it's attacked the mitochondria. Interestingly enough, talking about statins, as we've done in the past, statins actually destroy mitochondrial production. So in Sweden, you get struck off if you don't use CoQ10 alongside statin protocols. So I used that, and it was, I'd love to be able to sit here, Mike, and say, and then I took this, and then I took that. It was a little bit more haphazard. Now, with my experience, I'm a little bit more structured. So somebody comes to me and they go, I'm really tired. Like, the first thing I'm doing, 100 milligrams of CoQ10 in the morning, 100 in the afternoon. How do you feel now? For a lot of people, that might just do the job. Then we start looking at things like, it's not just the fatigue. I'm just not driven. I'm so tired all the time. Right. Maybe look at tyrosine to boost dopamine production. Your red formula, brilliant. All of those sort of things I'm recommending. And even the testosterone booster, because things like Mucuna will drive dopamine. That's been shown against Alzheimer's.
Mucuna drives up dopamine more than anything, more than tyrosine. You would have to take probably 7 or 8 grams of tyrosine to get what a capsule of Mucuna does. Mucuna is more powerful than a lot of the Parkinson's drugs without the side effects.
Yes.
The Mucuna,
absolutely.
People take my testosterone booster, like, man, this stuff's great. I noticed it within the first couple of days. You didn't notice an increase in testosterone in the first couple of days. It doesn't happen that fast, as much as I would love to say it. If you notice that on the first dosage, it's because you have an increase in dopamine from the Mucuna.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why it's in there. The other reason is that it does improve luteinizing hormone and FSH, just like Bulbine does. So it is a testosterone boost herb as well. But the reason why you feel it is because of the dopamine response to it.
100%. And it that's where a little bit of your own personal detective work comes in. So I would be saying to people, look at your symptoms, and then, first things first, I'll do the Horowitz Lyme's questionnaire, which I don't know whether I can send you the questionnaire. Maybe I don't know whether you can link it onto YouTube, or certainly if people wanted to contact me, I can forward it. It's readily available. You just type in Horowitz Lyme's questionnaire, and there are multiple formats on PDF out there. And that will give you a very strong indication of whether it is Lyme's. Okay, so at least you can give yourself a good, solid clinical diagnosis. Okay, then you'll have a better idea. Also, obviously, the questionnaire will have, and you will know from your own experience what aspects you're dealing with. Is it brain fog? Is it memory issues? Is it joint pain? Is it nerve pain? Is it poor sleep? And then that's where, you know, I am so grateful for having met people like you, Charles Poliquin, because what then I was able to do was go, right, my sleep is shot. So what am I doing? I'm using magnesium. I'm using Epsom salt bath. I'm using magnesium cream. And also then maybe adding additional things like theanine or taurine or all of these aspects to that side of the protocol. Maybe I'm getting joint pain. So yes, of course, I'm taking serrapeptase, but maybe I'm taking curcumin as well. And I'm driving down inflammation through diet. Obviously, sugar is a key culprit. I mean, if anybody doesn't realize that by now, then I don't know what to say. You know, you need to be reducing your sugar intake, for Christ's sake. Lyme's loves sugar, which actually that's taken me to the one which was a newer addition, but was really interesting. And I like the concept behind it. It was developed by Dr. Eva Sarpi, and she used stevia, the sweetener, in a herbal formula. It doesn't taste as nice as the stevia you and I used to, like maybe as granules or whatever. Right. This one is like a tincture. It's green. It's the traditional kind of herbal approach. And you took that in conjunction with serrapeptase, from what I remember. And what you did was, the reason was really sneaky. It treated it like a Trojan horse. The Lyme's senses sweet sugar. So now it detaches from its biofilm, and it now comes out, because it's like, now we can play. And that is when you take serrapeptase and a shit ton of other antivirals and antibacteria, and you nuke it. And then maybe a few retreat back into the cyst form. Okay, rinse and repeat. So one thing I would say to people is, depending on the severity of your symptoms, you do have to be prepared to be in it for the long haul. Okay, in terms of, I would love to turn around and say this is an instant fix. I would love to be able to say and share with people that this will take you a week or 2 weeks. You may feel better within about 4 to 6 weeks, but it is a long-term process, and it's a long-term strategy, and you cannot be shaken from your path. Like we were talking about earlier, about if you're sad, you're happy, you're depressed, you're angry, life is shit, life is brilliant. You train, you train, you train every day. That's it. That's the mask that you tie yourself to. In this, you have to just be prepared to sit it out. There are going to be days when you're in bed, and there are days when you're going to be absolutely swinging off the chandeliers with energy, and you reclaim all that joy of life and happiness and energy that you've been lacking. And then there are other days when you just want to crawl into bed and just go, I'm
on the bipolar spectrum, so I understand those oscillating swings. those kind of things don't intimidate me. I know what it feels like to have high elation one day and then be in the depths of despair and swing back and forth. So you get used to that over time. You learn how to manage it. Some of the advice I did get from a therapist that I thought was really useful is, she said that, you're someone that's so focused on being optimal. You're always talking about, I want to be optimal. I want my hormones dialed in. I want everything in. So you're really into controlling all that. So she goes, for you, it's extra distressing when you're in that despair state, because you're in the exact opposite place that you want to be in. So you're going, how do I get out of this state as quickly as possible, is what she's telling me I'm thinking, which is 100% accurate. But what she said is,
it's killing you.
Relax in that state for a little bit. Don't try to be in such a hurry to get out of it. Just relax and go, what are the lessons I can learn from this state? And what that does is it takes the pressure off. So it takes the pressure off so that you come out of it a little bit faster just on its own. So that's some of the advice that, when I say that, I don't think therapy is useless at all. I think therapy is very useful. I think where it becomes counterproductive is when you're talking about the same thing into perpetuity. Okay, it's one thing to have 3 or 4 sessions talking about an issue, and then you get some action steps and you go apply it. It's another thing where you've been going to the same person for 2 years and you're talking about the same thing. It's easy money for the therapist, because they've got you hooked. You go, well, let's just keep talking about this problem. You'll feel better. No one feels better from talking about the same thing over and over and over again. Right? After a while, it becomes all of a sudden now it becomes more something you're focused on even more now as a result of talking about it so much. So talk about it, get advice, apply the advice, move on.
And you know what you did? That's perfect advice, and it also segues into another aspect that I was going to touch on, which is moving away a little bit from the supplementation, which we will come back to. But I was listening to a podcast, and I think it was Dr. Thelma Jones. You know what? I can hardly remember people's birthdays, but I've got a memory for these names that I haven't even thought of for like 10 years. But it was a doctor, she was talking about it, and she said something that was really profound at the time. She said, until you get on top of the emotional traumas in your life, you're never going to fully heal. And I remember sitting in the car and going, bullshit, I'm a bloke, I'm on top of my shit. Do you know what I mean? I got it dialed in. I can skip that bit. I had lost my father, and I'd never made I'm just getting a little bit emotional thinking about that. But yeah, I'd lost my father, and I'd never dealt with it. I had pushed it down, and I just driven forward. And the fact of the matter was that what happened and came out of that was that there was a lot of unresolved stuff that I needed to deal with. So I didn't go to counseling therapy. And me being me, I think you'll laugh at this because I'd read about, she mentioned something called EFT or tapping, and it's getting more and more well known now. So I made a bit of an attempt to find a tapping or EFT therapist locally. And when I couldn't find one, I became a master practitioner in EFT. And so I just thought, do you know what? I'll take the mountains of I'm just going to do it myself. And the idea behind it, and I'm not going to go into that in too much depth because once again, people can look into it themselves. The idea is that I'll give you the Eastern perspective and the Western. That the Eastern perspective is that all emotion is just energy in motion. And we get blockages and we get stoppages and we get areas of congestion, like a motorway where there's been a breakdown. Right. And what EFT does is like an exposure therapy. So rather than going, and I know you're on board with this kind of mindless, oh, everything's great. I wake up, I look at the mirror and I go, everything's great, everything 10 times. And I've got, Lyme's disease, my life is shocking, my marriage is falling apart, all of these things going on around me. How effective is that going to be? Not effective at all. Exposure therapy, instead, you're addressing it. And you tap on acupressure points. So in the exact same way, if people believe and follow acupuncture and they have a belief and an acceptance of that particular modality, it works exactly the same, but for emotions. And the Chinese already had this written into their Yellow Book of Medicine, under the Yellow Emperor's Book of Medicine, thousands of years ago, that every organ system had an emotion and a taste and a texture. So, for example, like the kidneys, it was blue, and the taste was salt, which when you think the adrenals are so responsible for salt uptake, is incredible. 2,000 years ago, they knew this stuff. And they knew that when the kidney yin, the kidney energy is depleted, you are shot. You're lacking energy, you're lacking libido, you're lacking focus, you're lacking drive. So they got that. Now, that's not the kidneys per se. Obviously, that's related to the adrenals, but they made the link. So right. Adrenals and kidneys are sort of one and the same. Anyway, so you tap on these points and you just say, I have got this pain, I have got this pain. So you're addressing it full on. And what happens, and it is difficult to really pass into words, but you will feel shifts. You may get very emotional. You may have very strong insights. You may have very powerful memories, and you may have very powerful moments that, like an emotional Herxheimer response. Mm-hmm. So what then happens is that you can then start moving on to positives of energetic principles you want to have. Now, moving to the West, because I know that some people will be scratching their head or they might be disbelieving or that I think it's bullshit. That's fine, and I'm completely respectful of. I'm just telling you what I found worked, and if people choose to use it, so be it. What the Western physician posits is that there are their nerve points, kind of intersections that just happen to be where the acupressure points are. So they've discovered this, and when you tap on these points, what happens is that there is a message sent to the fear-based portion of the brain, the amygdala. So not amygdala. See, I'm a fan of Star Wars, so I always think Princess Amidala. No, it's amygdala, fear-based portion of the brain. And the best way to look at it is that think of that as kind of, it is like the body on it in terms of information. It's overdoing it. It is in a consistent state of fight or flight. So the way I always kind of explain it to people is that if you've got a smoke alarm and it's really annoying that every time you just burn a bit of toast, it goes off, what do? Well, it's not a fire. You've got no problem. You've got nothing to worry about or panic about. So what do? You get a tea towel and you waft it underneath the smoke alarm and the smoke alarm goes off. So tapping is the tea towel and the amygdala is the smoke alarm. And there's a guy called Dawson Church, and he's done hundreds of placebo-based double-blind random control studies, predominantly on things like depression and anxiety. So they're looking at it more on a mental health aspect, but it's been used for sports performance, and it can be used for real physical pain. Because Bruce Lee said it himself. He said the mind controls everything, including real physical pain. So yeah, that's another one that I would strongly recommend looking at if you feel that something. So if you've come through it, you've made good progress, but you're still finding that there are restrictions. My guess is the restriction is emotional. And what I'll give you a quote, and it was hilarious to me. I'm not knocking them because I was in a whole classroom. It was when Charles did Biosignature, and he said something like Charles always did, a little nugget, and my jaw hit the floor because I was like, did he just say that? And nobody else picked up on it. And I just remember writing in my notes and underlining it like 10 times. He said, every chronic injury that just won't go is the result of an underlying emotional issue that hasn't been resolved. Something to that effect. I may be paraphrasing. And I was like, and you knew Charles, he's nuts and bolts.
when you have unresolved traumas, what's going on is you're basically a sleeper cell. You have this, your subconscious mind is being inundated with this all the time, whether you're aware of it or not. So in other words, it's having a negative effect on you, even if you're not thinking about it. And then it's not until it comes to the surface and is dealt with that that negative effect will go away. So what do most people do, especially men? Men are very good at the distraction game. Most men have a very difficult time taking advice, and most men have a very difficult time admitting that they have a problem. So those are the two things that are a big deal there. And anytime you're distracting yourself, it's because you're trying to avoid dealing with that emotional trauma. But it's almost like a protective mechanism because it's painful to deal with that stuff. It's not easy. And when you have to accept a lot of these things, and I mean, the first thing you have to do is accept it. Now, I hate the whole phrase of there's power in acceptance because people look at that as the end point. And they say, oh, yeah, you just have to accept the flaws with yourself. It's like, no, you don't. You don't have to accept the flaws with yourself. You have to identify the flaws with yourself. You have to be honest with the flaws with yourself. And then you have to do an action plan to do something about it. None of this acceptance bullshit. But you have to, you have to accept the fact that it actually happened, because sometimes you repress things. You do have to accept the fact, okay, this actually happened. Even though I don't have full memory of everything, I can feel it in my body. It happened. So let's accept that. Okay, now let's move on from that. You can't do anything about what happened. You can't go back in time as much as you would like to. You can't go back in time and change anything. You can't do anything about that. But what you can do is take full charge of the present, because it's empowering actions, even empowering actions that have nothing to do with the trauma you went through. Whatever it is, that's how you move forward with resilience. That's why, to me, physical training is so important. Not just lifting weights. We were talking about how important activity is. I lift weights 4 days a week. Okay, but that's not all I do. I do that for strength training. And when I go lift weights, I'm doing strength training. I'm not doing circuits with 20 moves and 20 reps per exercise. That to me is just wasting time. Those are what you're doing there is what my friend Vince McConnell in the last episode said is you're engaging in phantom reps, right? I love that phrase, phantom reps. Because when you're doing a high rep set, let's say 15 reps, the first 10 are worthless. The last 3 maybe. So these are phantom reps. So my attitude is when I'm lifting weights, the purpose of lifting weights is to increase strength. I'm not trying to increase endurance doing that. I'm not trying to increase cardiovascular health. I'll go sprinting, I'll go for long walks, I'll do interval training for that. And I don't try to combine the two modalities either. They're two separate modalities. Okay, so that's strength training. Now, if all I did were 4 sessions of strength training per week and then I'm sitting around doing nothing, I'm not going to be healthy. Physique composition won't even be that great. But more importantly, that is, I'm not going to be healthy. So what I do is 2-hour walks with my dog every single day, 10,000 steps minimum, sometimes more, 7 days a week without fail. And when I'm not motivated to do it, I always pick myself up and do it because I know she needs it. I'm doing it for her because she needs it. She's a high energy dog. She needs that activity. And honestly, having a dog is great for that because I'll be honest, there are days where I don't feel like doing it at all, but I got to do it for her. So if you want to be committed to long walks every day, get a high energy dog because that dog will terrorize your house if you don't get the dog out. hours, she's like a Zen monk by the time we get home. She's chilling for the afternoon. And then it's great for you. You're doing something for someone else. Guess what? It actually has a positive benefit for you too. Now, 10,000 steps a day, 7 days a week. People look at walking like it's a joke. They're like, that's not exercise, that's transportation. Now, I used to be one of the people that said, when people would say, hey, walking is the best form of exercise, I'm like, yeah, if you can't do anything else, walking to me is just how I get from point A to point B. And that's true. If you go walking for 20 minutes a day, that's a good starting point for someone who has been sedentary or they're obese. Fine, let's start off with 20 minutes a day. But if you want to get the real benefits of walking, 2 hours a day. And don't tell me you don't have time for it, because people who say they don't have time for it, they watch 4 hours of television on Netflix. They're watching garbage all day. They're watching sports. They're watching other people fulfill their dreams. You're watching an American football game. You're watching these alpha athletes fulfill their dreams while you're sitting around eating junk food and increasing oxygen levels, right? So you have time. You can listen to a podcast when you go walking. You can listen to something you find entertaining, music, whatever it is. So there's
absolutely
stuff like this. Now, 2 hours a day, 7 days a week, what I have found is that I lose so much body fat doing this that I have to make a point of eating in surplus so I don't lose too much weight. So it's totally flip-flop my whole mentality. I used to be like everyone else saying, you can't outrun a donut. Diet is more important than exercise for fat loss. I used to sing those mantras too, because that's what we were all taught. And my attitude is that's only true if you're sedentary. Yeah, nutrition is important to lose weight if you're sedentary, because that's the only way you're going to lose weight. You're not doing anything, you're not moving, you're not expending energy. So what do? You take in less energy. But who wants to do that? I'd rather be someone who's highly energetic and I engage in so much activity that it almost doesn't matter what I eat. I'm not saying that you should eat unhealthy. I'm just saying it doesn't matter as much, because your activity level is so high that you want to have a piece of cake every night, you can do that. You want to have this junk food, you love junk food, fine. Take your activity level to this really high degree. You can have junk food every day if you want to, and you're going to be fine.
The thing is, it makes me smile because Mike, who you met when we came over, he was a bike courier in London, and he would cycle, I think, like 30 miles just to get into town. And then obviously do another 70 to 100 miles and then cycle back home. And he got to that exact state where he'd be sat quite merrily eating a whole tub of Haagen-Dazs in front of me, because he just he'd burnt through so many calories. But you know what? It's interesting what you said. Unfortunately, you can liken it to the vaccine, that people would rather be in a calorie deficit.
Yeah.
And there's a term, precision nutrition, came up for. I'm trying to remember what it was called.
Because to me, it's embarrassing when I see men who fall into this. Okay, it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
Embarrassing for me to see men who just want to sit around stuffing their face with junk food. You should want to be strong and viral and dangerous. People should see you and they're like, that is not someone I want to fuck with. That guy right there, that guy walking with authority, that's the wrong person to fuck with. I'm going to go target someone else. You should have physical strength and prowess, and you should project strength. I don't understand why any man needs to be motivated to acquire those things. The bar is so low now, it's depressing. Why are you accepting being so weak as a person? They're like, oh, I don't want to exercise. I don't want to do anything that requires effort. I go, that is such a weak mindset. It's disgusting to me when I see people that are so weak like that, especially men. So my attitude is that you should be so driven that you're engaging in so much activity. Because my attitude is like, look, it doesn't have to be one or the other. You want to eat whatever you want, you can, but you got to make sure your activity level's at a high degree. Like what you were saying with your friend, his activity level is so high, he almost has to eat that Haagen-Dazs every day.
He didn't share any of the tight little git, but
food before you get filled up. So sometimes you need to add a little bit of junk just to get all the calories you need. But that's only
this is it.
Level is super high. So people are like, hey, I want to eat whatever I want. Okay, fine. You're gonna have to get your activity level to a super high degree. Well, I don't want to do that. Well, then you're a fucking little bitch, and I don't have any more advice for you. Okay, you just want to sit around and do nothing and just spray magic dust all over yourself and make 3 wishes. Okay, because I don't know. Nothing.
Well, this is it. We were talking about this before we started filming, and the problem now is that this bullshit is not only being propagated, but it's actually validated. So you talk like that. There's nothing you said I actually, see anybody with half a brain cell disagreeing with it. But the pushback is like, oh no, what you're talking about there is toxic masculinity. What? Just being a man who is resilient, looks after himself, is being able to be protective of those that are around him, that those people that he loves. Takes a, I don't personally, and I don't really care. I'll go out on a limb here. I don't really, what other people's opinions are irrelevant to me. I don't think that a man having the view of wanting to be that archetypal man, of looking after people around him and not kind of going into this netherworld that we've got now where people are actually saying, well, what is it to be a man? What is a woman? I don't know whether you've seen that Matt Walsh film, but he actually says to people, what is a woman? And they're just like, I can't answer that. I mean, we are actually there. We're there. If you had told me 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we will reach this stage, I would have gone, that's drugs talking. Do you know what I mean? One day that I will, that just asking the question, what is a woman, is a controversial position, is insane. And the problem is, I have got no issue with people leading the lives that they want to live, but you don't get to tell me that the life that I've chosen to live is toxic. Right. The definition of all the things. So that's fine. If you say I'm gender fluid, I don't, listen, as long, that's where I think Jordan Peterson's been so vilified, is that all he said was, what you're doing is fine, crack on, but you don't get to put those words in my mouth. I don't have to use pronouns, you don't get to control or censor my language. So that's not disrespectful. He's not being hateful. He's not being aggressive. He's just saying, you don't get to filter my language. Now, if I want to be a man who trains, who wants to be protective of other people and is a capable person who is resilient, then I'm sorry, I don't see that as a negative, and I don't have to defend it.
People equate all these things that we're saying with, okay, you want to bully other people, you want to dominate other people, and that's not what anyone's saying. Those are traits of someone that is overcompensating. Someone with
low bloody testosterone,
high estrogen, and now you're overcompensating. Yeah. That's the kind of person that gets into bar fights and has to try to project, try to intimidate people. I'm not saying that at all. I'm a very friendly person. I'm a very compassionate person. I'm a very caring person. I'm all those things. But I'm also not someone that you can just treat like a bitch and accept to tolerate it. Someone comes at me disrespectfully, I'm going to retaliate accordingly. It's as simple as that. I'm a cool guy.
Is there anything wrong with that? Yeah, exactly. There's nothing wrong. And it's just setting up very stringent boundaries and having, and we were talking about this as well briefly, that's the whole force and power behind Andrew Tate's popularity, is that what he's doing in a very clever way, because he markets himself very successfully and he's created a persona that is provocative, and he knows how to do that slice, that clip. So, you cut one bit of our conversation and it goes viral because people are like, what the hell is that guy from the UK saying? Jesus Christ, he's a maniac. Because what we do is we just take it and we decontextualize it. But if you're smart, you go back and you listen to the context. And I'm not talking about his views on women, so we put that aside. So if anybody gets irate, you can have a conversation with somebody, not agree with them with everything. We know we can agree to differ on subjects. But when it comes to aspects of masculinity, what it is to be a man, that men do, suffer in life, that men do have to learn to overcome that they do have to work through adversity. I'm sorry, I don't see any objection to that. I don't see any argument with that. It's a given. It's just a fact of life. It's just a fact of life. And people just don't want to accept it. And now what we are in is in a situation where if you want to hold on to that, then that is considered toxic. And I fail to see what part of that is. If I saw somebody being bullied, I'll be the first to step in and in their defense. So it's a nonsense.
Sometimes people defend their problems. And that's the one point he brought up that I thought was really good. He goes, a lot of people with depression, they defend having the depression. In other words, they're going, yeah, I'm depressed. Like, don't tell me that it's not okay for me to be depressed. And then they defend the depression as if it's a friend of theirs when it's having a really deleterious effect on you.
Yes.
So my attitude is you shouldn't defend it. You can accept the fact that you have it, but you go, now, how do I flip this to empower myself? How do I address this so it doesn't destroy my life? I've dealt with depression my entire life, but I'll tell you what I haven't done is I've never used it as an excuse for not taking charge of my life. If anything, it's a fuel. If anything, it's going, okay, I don't want to do this, but now I have to do it. So I can tell this voice in the back of my head to shut the fuck up. You don't have control over me. All right. I don't feel like doing this. Hey, shut the fuck up. You don't have control over me. I decide what I'm going to do and all that. So just because you have depression doesn't mean that some people are going, look, you don't get it. you don't understand depression. And that's true. There's a lot of bad advice that people give on depression. But at the same time, don't use it as a crutch for not doing anything. Sometimes people use it as an excuse now. Well, I've got this problem, so I can't do anything about it. I've just got to accept it. That mentality I don't like at all. It's a very self-defeating mentality.
Exactly. Well, it's like when people say, my bad back. You've just made it you. Not, I've hurt my back. Okay. Or you've twinged it. Like, I know that when you were talking to Vince, you were talking about some of the injuries that you'd had, and but you're not associating with them. What you're doing is you're going, right, I am going to go to ART and I'm going to work. So you're not, it's not a crutch. It's an issue and an obstacle you're currently dealing with. It's exactly the same way. I remember saying at the time to my ex-wife, when I got to the diagnosis on Lyme's, that I said, it's chosen the wrong person to fuck with. I didn't use it as a kind of bed to kind of, oh, woe is me. In fact, nobody around me knew what I was dealing with until I got over it. Because what was to be gained? I didn't want sympathy. I didn't want validation. I wanted to get better. And until I could find, if I felt somebody would be able to help me with that, then yes. But, just putting a post up on Facebook, not feeling good today, you've got to take responsibility and move on.
Well, that's where I think a lot of group therapy is self-defeating too, because you have a problem and now 5 other people have the same problem, and you're like, oh, it's so nice to have to talk to other people with the same problem. But now all 5 of you are just talking about the same problem over and over again every week. What is anyone doing about any of this stuff, though? When are we going to get to the phase of solutions? Are we just going to talk about the same thing every week into perpetuity? Now we're all bonding over this. You're bonding over something to the point where you're now you're not incentivized to get over it, because this is what you're bonding over. Like, I notice people that love to complain a lot, they're always friends with other people who love to complain a lot, because they can all get
misery loves company.
It's like, oh, I got my cable bill. I can't believe it was $150. Oh yeah, I got mine last week. It was the same thing. Yeah, then I called them up to complain. Oh, you too? Yeah, I did that as well. And now they're bonding over this. But this is all very self-defeating behavior. And honestly, to me, it's embarrassing when I hear people that just sit around and complain all the time about nonsense. Like, well, what are you doing about any of this stuff? Like, often I hear women complaining about their husbands all the time. They don't have anything good to say about him. And I go, I would hate to be that guy. I would hate to be the where my wife is out there just saying what a loser I am, and like, what a dud I am and all that. This is supposed to be the most important person in your life, and she's talking smack about you to strangers. So I think I don't trust people who talk very deleteriously about their significant other. Okay, so if I'm talking to a woman and I barely know her and she's going on and on and on about what a loser her husband is, I'm sitting there going, I don't trust you at all, because that's supposed to be the most important person in your life. And here's
person in your life,
here's me, a stranger. And then guys do this too. These guys get together at the cigar lounge and they're all just complaining about my ball and chain at home, and my wife is such a nag. It's like, well, why are you with this person? Okay, this sounds miserable. Well, you don't have to be married. You don't have to be with someone. You can just be single. You don't. If the other person is not building you up, then why would you want to be in that situation? And then they get a payoff though, because they meet up with other men that have the same attitudes, and they all sit around.
Who also complain,
drinking whiskey, smoking cigars, which everyone thinks are such masculine habits. Oh yeah, I'm going to smoke drink whiskey. Whiskey, all alcohol converts testosterone to estrogen. So you might as well take a birth.
So good luck with that.
There's nothing. There's nothing that increases masculinity about alcohol. It lowers testosterone. It lowers growth hormone. We're talking one drink, and it converts testosterone to estrogen. It increases insulin resistance. None of these things make you stronger. They make you weaker. So let's start there. And cigars, I don't even have to get into that. All right. These are just. It's funny how when people they try to do habits. Well, if I smoke a cigar and I drink whiskey, I'm going to appear masculine. To who? To who?
To other idiots smoking cigars and drinking whiskey. I mean, that's it. That's a very niche audience, and it's a very, very small echo chamber. No, it's and this is the problem. I think that we're in an era of social media stupidity, where little clips of people, like you said, smoking cigars, and you just get you'll find that the algorithm shoves you to that. So all my clips are people training, talking, like, I just flick through and there's you talking, and straight after there's Hoovman, and straight after that there's Layne Norton, and somebody else is watching, Christ knows what, but we all get shunted into our little echo chamber, and that's not necessarily healthy, because obviously the people who could probably do with watching, I'm watching you and I'm like, yep, okay, that's interesting, or I might pick something up, but by and large it's just reinforcing what I already know. What somebody who's like, I want to be a man who talks to his woman like this, and I'm going to smoke a cigar and have whiskey, even though I hate both of them, could do with watching something a little bit more informative and science-based and actually get off their arse and get to the gym.
The most lethal men I've ever met, okay, we're talking people with special forces military backgrounds or professional fighters. These are always the nicest people you'll ever meet. Okay, Definitely. They are killers in their craft. They get into that octagon and the door shuts, switch flips, and they are killers. They're going to kill the opponent in front of them. They have vicious intent, okay? But the second they get out, nicest people. These guys I know people that have killed people all over the world in military operations. You meet these people, you would never guess that that's their background. The thing about men like this is, they're humble because they've been through so much adversity. They've been around people that are bigger badasses than they are, or just as badass as they are. So they don't have to project anything to average people because there's nothing for them to prove. Someone like Ty Rader, he doesn't have to prove how tough he is. Okay, look what he does for a living. He goes into countries surreptitiously with a team where he's risking his own life to save kids that he doesn't even know, strangers, from the horrors of human trafficking. He's willing to risk his life. He's willing to get on a plane and fly to another country where you may get killed, you may get captured, thrown into a prison, and they throw away the key for the rest of your life, for strangers, for kids you do not know. They're not relatives of yours, you don't know them, and they're going to be taken to an orphanage where you're never going to see them again, right? Just because they're for their own protection, right? Because they have relationships with the people that they save, where they keep tabs on them, like, hey, how you doing now, and all that. It just doesn't work that way. Meet people like this, and they are the most humble, low-key people ever. They don't need and they are lethal killers. You put them in a combative situation, they're going to wipe the floors with everybody in front of them. But they don't have to. So people often think that this whole toxic masculinity, it's not masculinity that's toxic. It's the illusion of masculinity that's the problem. It's people that are protecting masculinity. See, that's what they're equating it with. That asshole at the bar that just picks fights with people for no reason, they're looking
He's
at
not
that.
Masculine.
Yeah, exactly. It's the antithesis of masculinity.
Yeah.
They're demonizing a word. They're basically saying, see, this is what men are like, and we need to rip that out of men. It's like, no, this is what we men are like. The men they're talking about toxic masculinity they make it sound as if they're talking about the strong alphas. That's the way they behave. No, that's not the way the alphas behave. It's the way the betas behave. All right.
Exactly.
That are really inappropriate to women and all that. Those are not alpha people. Those are the betas. Because they're trying to overcompensate again. They're going, hey, I never got attention from women when I was younger, so now I'm in a position of power. I'm just going to abuse women. Okay, that's not a strong man. That's a weak man.
Yep. No, I couldn't agree more, because at the end of the day, I still remember, a few people have made a very, very strong impact in my life, and my martial arts instructor was one of them. And his name is, he's still alive. He's in incredible shape, Sifu Yuk Kwan Lee. And we were at some venue by the coast, and it's not so prevalent now, but we had the National Front and the BNP, the British racist organizations, basically. And we had a very, very divergent culturally mixed class. So we'd finished training, and I think we went to the pub, and these guys were like with BNP, and so I just come up to the doors, and a lot of the lads had come out and were saying, oh, we're not going in there, it's going to kick off. And my instructor came by and just said, what's happened? And they said, oh, they some racist in there. And he just went, okay. And he just walked in, and and then they walked out. They walked out of the pub, and they fucked off down the road. And to this day, I don't know what he said or what he did, but I can tell you now for nothing that, like you said earlier, the mark of a real man is that it's not having to, do these big showy movements. He was somebody who'd walk in the room and you knew. End of discussion. And that was very evident from the way he carried himself. There would have been maniacs. I don't care how many were in there. There would have been maniacs if they thought, because I'd seen him in action, and take it from me, they would have not lasted 3 seconds. So the fact of the matter is, but then again, somebody who is a complete gentleman and follows all the ethos of martial arts in terms of respect and the highest levels of holding themselves to an ethical level, and it's not macho. Not macho. You never, it is exactly, I think you put a post up recently. I was just laughing because I thought that's so true. The guys who are grunting in the gym, they're doing dumbbell curls and they're like, "Argh!" And you're looking and thinking to yourself, what the? And I watched Adam Nelson train at Charles's facility in Rhode Island.
Yeah.
And he was chatting, and it was an internship, and he's talking to people. And the next thing, Charles goes, "Yeah, next set, boom." Switches off, lifts, puts the weight down, back into the room. Yeah. Anyway, we were just saying, and that is, it's the same you'll find with martial artists or anybody who can hold themselves in that sphere, is that it's not. I never grunt. Like I may have made a little sound when recently I was quite pleased with this. I had 37.5 kilos around my waist for one chin up, and
amount of weight.
Yeah, I was quite happy with that, and I may have at the end of the last rep, at that rep, but that's it. You don't have to be showy.
When you're doing maximum efforts, there's a time and place for it. There's actually a protocol. It's not just theatrics. There's actually a scientific protocol. Well, you will be able to get into a different gear when you apply it properly. You just don't need to do it during your warm-up sets. If you can do 10, Look, when I did
pull downs.
When I deadlifted 6 plates for the first time, I screamed out because I was taking the weight off the ground and I could feel it slowing down as it got just below my knee. And I really got to get it from below my knee to lock out as quickly as possible, or you're going to blow out your back. So when that happened, I was like, I just to give myself that second gear to get it going. So there's a time and place for that. But when I'm doing something I can do easily 5 times, let's say I could do it 7 times and the 7th rep would be difficult, but I'm only doing 5. Why do I need to scream those 5 reps?
Well, sometimes, exactly. I mean,
sometimes people are screaming on the deadlift and they haven't even picked up the weight yet. And it's all one reason. It's all because they're just ostentatious and they are desperate to be noticed. That's the only reason why.
It's attention-seeking behavior. Absolutely. No, well, it's so true. You look at some of the people and the minuscule weights that they're moving, and you think, well, I think it was because I remember reading. I think it was in one of Pavel's books about intra-abdominal pressure. And he was talking, and he was relating it to martial arts and the ki, that there was actual statistical evidence that sudden compression and the way it affected the internal organs worked as an amplifier to strength.
That's why wearing a belt. See, people always say, "I'm going to wear a belt when I deadlift to protect my back." I go, "It's not going to protect your back. It's a performance enhancer because it enhances your breathing. That mechanism you just mentioned. Good technique is what protects your back. You want to protect your back, how to do it properly, because you should only do it without a belt and not hurt your back. The point of the belt is that it gives you something physical to brace, because it's really hard to teach someone how to brace, to create that internal pressure, but it's
without bulging.
It's easy to do it when you have a belt, because the belt is pushing right in. All you have to do is push into the belt and you got it. So even if you could wear a dress belt, you could wear a belt that you wear with a normal pair of jeans and just put it around your waist, something to put. Because that's the real benefit of the belt. But the cool thing about wearing a belt is you actually get an abdominal workout in it as well. When I do heavy deadlift, that takes care of my abs training too. Because if I'm wearing a belt and I'm pushing into it the whole time, I'm bracing. My abs are sore the next day from that. So that's what I like about wearing a belt is it's very difficult to teach that bracing. You can describe it, and most people suck in. Or it's hard to get.
So you're not a fan of TVA activation then? I mean, I remember Dr. Stuart McGill saying on an interview, if you want a herniated disc, that's a surefire way of doing it. I mean, I always thought to myself, well, just use basic biomechanics. As somebody who's been punched in the stomach and the face, in martial arts and boxing, if somebody's going to punch me, am I going to brace against it? Not bulge my stomach, but brace? Or am I going to suck my stomach in and hopefully accommodate that fist nicely into my spine? I mean, it never made sense. And I think that it's easy.
I don't want to do a vacuum and keep that position and then try to lift something heavy. Okay.
It's fine. No, and I saw the old time strongmen used it for feats of more showing the contours and what the muscular ability that they could contract and move those muscles. Like I think you demoed it, like doing the wave and everything else. All of those things are great. They're more feats of your mind body coordination. Like, look what I can do
Exactly.
You know, with my body. But I wouldn't do that with with 6 plates on the bar, you know.
So when people suck in before they do something, it's counterintuitive. You know, they're thinking intuitively, I should do this, but
Yeah.
where training comes into play. But you know, the reality is
Yeah.
you learn real fast what works and what doesn't, because if you try doing that, your performance is not going to be there. So my
Well, you
attitude,
herniate a disc.
yeah, that's true. You don't want to learn some things you want to learn from other people's experiences. But my attitude is the truth is always in the performance. So when someone says, "Hey, here's what works," I'm like, "Okay, well, what's your performance?" Because if you don't have an impressive performance, then how do I know? You don't even know if it works. You have to have some kind of performance to back it up. It's like, yeah, if you throw this punch and you do this, like, okay, well, let's see that in application. Let's see you do that and what happens with it. What's your history of applying this technique that you're deriving benefits from? That's what it always comes down to. The truth is always in the performance. That's all I care about. People talk about whatever they're doing. If someone's going to say, here's how you make more money, I'm going to go, okay, well, let's see this in action where it actually worked for you.
Yeah. Well, you hear it in martial arts as well. They go, you say, okay, well, show me something that you know. Oh, I can't. It's too dangerous. As soon as you hear that, you know you're talking to a bullshit artist.
Yeah,
It's like, no, I can't do it. It's too deadly. And you're like, well, you know, if you aren't pressure tested, it's when I went from martial arts to boxing, you know, you got your head pounded because I was used to being there with my hands low because you're using your kicks. I'm at a distance from you. You come in, I can step back. Now with right close, I can tell you now, you bring your hands up pretty damn quickly. So the truth of the matter is that you've got to pressure test it, and you're absolutely right. You need to actually know what it is that you've got to say, right, okay, well, I've got this theory and this technique, and just don't. I shared this story because we touched on some of my favorite memories of Charles, but he was somebody who just was the gift of always giving when it came to those funny moments. I remember when I first met him and I thought, oh, wow, you know, you've got all these opportunities to ask him these questions that have been bugging you for ages. And he was hysterical with it. I remember we were walking down the corridor on the first biosignature course I did. And I said to him, Charles, can I just ask you, where do you stand on the whole kind of bracing versus TVA activation thing? Now, I already knew where he was going to be, but I was just interested to hear his thinking behind it. And he went, Alan, TVA activation. And I went, yeah. He went, so there's no placebo blind double blind study or anything like that. That was his response in a moment, and I still remember that. You know, he was able to cut through very, very complex ideas quite quickly. But
yeah, that's a high level of skill is right there. Well, look, man, we've been talking for 2 hours, so let's wrap it up
already.
Yeah, time goes by fast. So all your contact information, I'm just going to put in the notes so we don't have to go through your website.
Fantastic. Yeah.
People can go follow you on social media and check out your website, check out everything else you have going on. Is there anything you're working on right now? Is there anything, let's end with what's exciting for you this year in 2023?
I like you, I decided it's not so much a professional development. I just decided I put martial arts aside for so many years, and over the last few years, I really missed it. And the mistake I was making was that I was kind of looking for classes in clubs around me. But of course, the hours I work, like when we were originally going to meet up, I'd take a class then. So eventually, I'm an absolutely exceptional instructor. So I'm learning Filipino stick fighting, Wing Chun. So I'm integrating that into my own personal, life now. And it's just lovely to get back into it. It's something that I'm so passionate about. And it's been like dormant. It's like blowing off the dust on a book that you loved, you know what I mean? How have I not, or a record, and thinking, how have I not listened to this for ages? So that's brilliant. And I'm currently doing a course with probably one of the world's leading you haven't had Layne Norton on your show, have you?
No, I haven't. I know how he is, of course. For the most part, I have people on the show who I actually know, because I'm at that stage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I want to have these kind of conversations, and also
an organic one.
I don't draw big numbers like the shows he's been on, so I usually don't even reach out to people like that. For me, it's people that I know that I want to have conversations. If some people I don't know that well, we'll have on the LLA show because we get way bigger numbers on that than on. So this is more for me to have interesting conversations with people.
Well, it's lovely for me because it's just like, it is having a chat, across the pond, with a friend I haven't seen for a long time. But so I'm doing his certification, and I'm really enjoying that as well. It's interesting for me because in a way, it's almost like having done Biosignature, your course. It's so in depth and fascinating, and it's got so many broad benefits to it. But I do see a lot of people who just need a level of communication in terms of the nutrition guidance, and that is a little bit more, that is not as complicated, to put it bluntly. I listened to you talking to Christian, and I was like, yeah, where these guys are is at the peak of their professional and hormonal lives. I'm dealing with people who really, you just got to get in, and we enter on that real foundational tier of education on calories, like we said, about moving more. So, right. Giving people, saying it's like saving up to buy a car, you've got to make certain concessions. You can't expect to put, no money aside and then go, well, why am I not getting a result? And then right. Giving people that kind of dichotomy of saying, well, yes, you could move a lot more and give yourself more calories to play with. Alternatively, you can just be in a calorie deficit, or you could have a bit of both, move right. a little bit more. And so it's, but of course, the nice thing I like about Layne Norton is he comes with receipts. So everything is evidence-backed, everything's scientifically validated, studies behind everything, very, very thorough. And he's like us, very outspoken. I don't necessarily agree with him, but then until you can advance a hypothesis scientifically of your own that beats the existing hypothesis, you have to listen to the expertise. And I think that it's a really interesting shift for me, and I'm really enjoying that. But the only thing I was going to leave on was because we talked about supplementation, just wanted to leave on one other thing for people who are looking to maybe really fixing or get starting on their Lyme's journey today. I would recommend looking up the Wim Hof breathing technique, the famous Dutch guy who is an absolute legend. I've had the pleasure of meeting him, and the form of breathing is actually powerfully antiviral and antibacterial as well. So you alkalize your bloodstream, and you can actually really boost your health and energy through that. That's something I did during lockdown. We talked about it 2020. That there's been a lot of studies on Lyme's as well. So I highly, highly recommend people look into that. Then doing dry brushing, getting a long handle brush and brushing up the limbs improving lymphatic flow towards your heart. And then finally, finish your morning routine off with a cold shower. Start gradually and then build up. So now for me, 2 minutes every day, ice bath, all my mates are into it as well, is a really powerful way forward. But that has also been shown to really help do what? Drive down inflammation. And what have we been talking about for so much of this is inflammation and the inflammatory cascade that Lyme's creates. So hopefully that's given some people, we've talked about some of the supplements for energy. Some of the people can look up are, and I've made a little list here just to remember, Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt, Dr. Peter Jostling, well, he's the guy who runs the Alison Max company, Dr. Fred Kuipers, who was a student of Dr. Klinghardt, Stephen Buhner, he's got, actually there's a book here that I highly recommend, Healing Lyme. That would be a good one, and it's got a whole section on all the different herbs and what they work for, and things like
book, Herbs for Increasing Testosterone. Actually, I read one of his books a while back.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's amazing. So what he's done there is he's got everything from DHA to lion's mane to Uncaria tomatosa to andrographis to Polygonum cuspidatum. All of these different herbs. And what they and that would help people. I got that really when I was a lot better, but it will help people kind of work out what they should be taking. And he's got a kind of simplified protocol, which if people wanted to kind of buy, you'd probably be able to piece it together on something like iHerb in America. And Mike, what I wanted to say was just a really massive, sincere thank you, because it's my partner's been pushing me, and anybody else who will talk to me and said, look, you've got this information on Lyme's, you really want to get it out there. And I was going to write a book and I just didn't have time. And I thought, well, I just want to get that in. I don't care what the medium is. I just want to get that information out because it could save lives. Or, if it improves one person who's listened to this, it improves their life, job done. It's just been a few hours of our time. I've loved it.
It definitely
and like I said, I'm not professing to be a doctor. I can only give you the benefit of my own experience, but I just thank you and welcome, this opportunity to have been able to communicate all that information, and I hope that it really is helpful for people. Richard Horowitz as well. Richard Horowitz is another guy that people should look into.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. No, I appreciate it. That was excellent. Let me just hit stop
Pleasure.
recording.